James Miller pulled into his driveway after a long Tuesday at the accounting office. The early evening sun cast long shadows across his modest suburban home as he gathered his laptop bag and the takeout dinner he grabbed on the way. Something felt off as he approached his house, but he couldn't immediately place what it was. Then he noticed it. The garage door was partially open, about a foot off the ground. James was certain he had closed it completely that morning. With caution, he set down his things on the front step and walked over to the garage. He bent down and peered under the gap. A shiny blue sedan, definitely not his, was parked inside his garage. James stood up straight, blinking in confusion. Had someone mistaken his house for another? Was this some kind of prank? He pressed the garage door opener, and as the door lifted, he confirmed that yes, an unfamiliar car was indeed parked in his garage. It was a newer model Toyota with a small crystal pendant hanging from the rearview mirror and shopping bags visible in the back seat. What the hell? James muttered to himself. He walked around the vehicle, looking for any clues about who it might belong to. There was a parking permit sticker for Oakwood Apartments, the complex across the street that had been completed just 3 months ago. James pulled out his phone and snapped several photos of the car, including its license plate. This was just too strange. Mrs. Rodriguez, his next-door neighbor for 8 years, was watering flowers in her front yard and noticed James looking confused. "Everything okay over there, James?" she called. James walked over to her fence. "Someone parked their car in my garage. I have no idea who or why." Mrs. Rodriguez looked surprised, then her expression changed to one of understanding. "Oh, I think I know whose car that is. A woman from those new apartments was walking around here earlier. Blonde hair, very fancy sunglasses, talking loudly on her phone. I saw her go toward your house but didn't think much of it." "Did she say anything to you?" James asked. "No, but I overheard her complaining about parking. Those apartments only allow 1 car per unit in their garage, and she was saying something about needing space for her second car." James thanked Mrs. Rodriguez and walked back to his garage, staring at the mysterious car. He checked his watch. It was already 6:30 p.m. He picked up his dinner and went inside, his appetite diminished by the strange situation. After eating, James decided to take action. He printed a polite but firm note. "This is private property. Please remove your vehicle immediately and contact me at this number," and left it on the windshield along with his phone number. He tried to enjoy his evening, but found himself checking the garage every hour. The car remained there all night. The next morning, James woke early and checked again. The blue sedan still sat in his garage, his note apparently ignored. He had an important meeting at work and couldn't deal with this now, so he left for the office, deciding to handle the situation when he returned. Little did James know, this mysterious car would become the center of a neighborhood drama that would test his patience, teach him about standing up for himself, and ultimately lead him to take an action that would shock everyone involved. James returned from work with new determination. The blue sedan still sat in his garage, his note untouched on the windshield. His patience was wearing thin. After changing into casual clothes, he grabbed the photos he'd taken and walked across the street to Oakwood Apartments. The main entrance required a keycard, but James waited only 5 minutes before a resident held the door open for him with a friendly smile. The lobby was modern with potted plants and a directory board. James studied the names, hoping for a clue, but realized he didn't know the car owner's name. At the management office, a young man named Tyler sat behind a desk. "Hi, I live across the street," James explained, showing the photos on his phone. "Someone from this building parked their car in my garage without permission. It's been there since yesterday." Tyler frowned. "That's definitely not allowed. Do you have the license plate number?" James showed him a close-up of the plate. "That's Karen Wilson's car," Tyler said immediately. "Apartment 3B? She's been, well, let's just say you're not the first neighbor with concerns." "Can you call her down here?" James asked. "I'm sorry, we can't do that for privacy reasons. But I can give you her apartment number." James thanked Tyler and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Standing outside apartment 3B, he took a deep breath and knocked firmly. After a moment, the door swung open. A blonde woman in her 40s stood there, dressed in expensive-looking workout clothes despite no signs she'd been exercising. Large designer sunglasses sat on top of her head. "Yes?" she asked impatiently. Hi, I'm James Miller from across the street. Your car is in my garage, and I need you to move it immediately. Karen's expression didn't change. Oh, that's your garage. I didn't think anyone was using it since you always park in the driveway. James blinked in disbelief. It doesn't matter where I park, it's my garage. You can't just use it without asking. Karen leaned against her doorframe. Look, we have terrible parking here. They only give us one spot per apartment, which is ridiculous because I have 2 cars. Your garage was open yesterday, and you weren't using it. That doesn't make it public parking, James said, his voice rising slightly. I need you to move your car now. I can't right now. I'm waiting for an important call, Karen said, checking her nails. Maybe later tonight. Or tomorrow. This isn't negotiable, James said firmly. It's trespassing on private property. Karen's friendly facade dropped instantly. Don't threaten me. Do you know who my husband is? He's a lawyer, and he'll make your life miserable if you make a big deal about this. I don't care if he's the president, James replied. Move your car within the hour, or I'm calling the police to report it as unauthorized use of private property. Go ahead and call them. Karen snapped. They won't do anything. It's just a parking spot you're not even using. Stop being so selfish and help out a neighbor. We're not neighbors. You live in a different building. I never gave you permission to use my property. Whatever, Karen said, reaching for her door. I'll move it when I have time. Maybe tomorrow or the next day. Before James could respond, she slammed the door in his face. He stood there for a moment, stunned by her entitlement. Through the door, he could hear her voice, already on the phone, complaining about that awful man threatening me over nothing. James walked back to his house, anger bubbling inside him. This simple problem was turning into a nightmare. As he reached his driveway, he realized this wouldn't be resolved easily. Karen clearly had no intention of respecting his property or his requests. He needed a different approach. The following morning, James woke up early and immediately checked his garage. The blue sedan remained exactly where it had been for the past 2 days. His frustration growing, he decided to try a more official approach to resolve the situation. After a quick breakfast, James called the local police non-emergency line. He explained his situation to the dispatcher, who seemed sympathetic but not particularly alarmed. Sir, since this is on private property and there's no damage to your property, it's technically a civil matter, the dispatcher explained. We can send an officer to document the situation, but there's not much enforcement we can do without a court order. James accepted the offer for documentation, and within an hour, Officer Rivera arrived. The young officer listened carefully, took notes, and examined the car. I can run the plates to confirm ownership, Officer Rivera said, but the apartment manager already identified the owner for you, so that's established. I'll file a report, but honestly, your fastest solution might be through small claims court for trespassing. Small claims court? James asked incredulously. That could take weeks. Officer Rivera nodded sympathetically. I understand your frustration. Let me try something. The officer called Karen Wilson using the contact information from her vehicle registration. James could hear Karen's voice through the phone, starting off sweet, but quickly turning defensive and loud. After a few minutes, Officer Rivera hung up with a sigh. She claims she has verbal permission from you to use the garage temporarily and that you're now going back on your word. Officer Rivera explained. Without clear evidence either way, my hands are tied legally. After the officer left, James called his homeowner's insurance company. The representative explained that while they could process a claim if her car damaged his property, they couldn't help remove an unwanted vehicle. Desperate, James contacted a towing company. We can't tow from private property without the property owner's permission, the dispatcher said. I am the property owner, James exclaimed. Right, but since it's inside your garage, not parked in your driveway or blocking access, we need to see documentation proving ownership of both the property and the garage before we could proceed. And even then, we might need a court order. Too much liability otherwise. By late afternoon, James had exhausted nearly every option. He even consulted a lawyer friend who confirmed that while he had the right to remove the car, most methods would open him up to potential lawsuits from Karen. That evening, James noticed Karen walking past his house. He hurried outside to confront her again. Karen, it's been 3 days. You need to move your car immediately. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. I've been busy. Maybe this weekend. This weekend isn't acceptable. I need access to my garage. For what? Karen scoffed. You never use it anyway. I've been watching your house for weeks. You always park in the driveway. James felt a chill run down his spine at the revelation she'd been monitoring his habits. That's my personal choice, he said firmly. It doesn't give you the right to use my property. Look, Karen said condescendingly, I'm doing you a favor by actually using that space. It's wasteful to have an empty garage. My homeowners association would fine people for that kind of inefficiency. This isn't your homeowners association, James retorted. This is my private property. Karen waved her hand dismissively. I'll move it when I'm ready. And if you damage my car or try to tow it, my husband will sue you into oblivion. As she walked away, James stood in his driveway, feeling helpless and increasingly angry. Traditional methods weren't working. Karen clearly had no respect for boundaries or property rights. That night, while reviewing his calendar, James noticed his upcoming vacation, a week-long trip to visit his parents in Florida that he planned months ago. Suddenly, an idea began to form in his mind. If Karen wanted to park in his garage so badly, perhaps he should let her, with a twist. Sometimes the best lessons came from natural consequences. James sat at his kitchen table that evening, sipping coffee and thinking hard about his predicament. His vacation to Florida was scheduled to begin this Saturday, just 3 days away. Karen's car had now been in his garage for nearly 4 days, with no sign that she intended to move it anytime soon. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows as James reviewed his options. He tried being polite. He tried getting authorities involved. He even tried being confrontational. Nothing had worked against Karen's wall of entitlement. The vacation plans flashed through his mind again. 1 week away from home, visiting his parents in their beachside condo. The tickets were already purchased, the time off approved. He couldn't and wouldn't cancel because of Karen's intrusion. Then, like a bolt of lightning, the idea struck him. What if I just left? James murmured to himself, a small smile forming on his lips. He stood up and walked to his front window, looking across the street at the Oakwood apartments. Somewhere in there, Karen was going about her evening, probably not giving a second thought to the fact that she had essentially stolen someone's property. James began to form a plan. He would simply lock his garage door before leaving for vacation, with Karen's car still inside. She had made her choice to park there without permission. Now she could deal with the consequences of not having access to her vehicle for a week. But I need to be smart about this, James said to himself, grabbing a notebook. First, he needed documentation. James spent the next hour creating a detailed timeline of events, including his discovery of the car, his conversations with Karen, the visit from the police, and his multiple requests for her to move the vehicle. He printed out the photos he'd taken and organized everything in a folder. Next, he visited Mrs. Rodriguez next door. I'm heading to Florida to visit my parents this weekend, he explained after she invited him in. Would you mind keeping an eye on my place while I'm gone? And also, he hesitated, then explained the situation with Karen. Mrs. Rodriguez chuckled. Of course, I'll watch your house. And don't worry about that woman. She needs to learn some manners. James asked if she would be willing to write a brief statement about what she had observed, and she happily agreed. The next morning, James installed a small security camera on his porch, positioned to capture both his front door and garage. He then visited 2 other neighbors, gathering additional statements about Karen's car being parked in his garage without permission. That afternoon, James took his documentation to the local police station and spoke with a sergeant. I'm not asking you to do anything right now, James explained. I just want this on record in case there are issues while I'm away. The sergeant reviewed the materials and added them to the initial report Officer Rivera had filed. Smart move, the sergeant nodded. Cover your bases. On Friday evening, with his suitcase packed and his early morning flight confirmed, James wrote a letter. He carefully explained that the owner of the blue Toyota had parked in his garage without permission, had refused multiple requests to move it, and that he was now leaving for a pre-planned vacation. He noted that the car would remain safely locked in the garage until his return the following Saturday. He made 3 copies of this letter, one to leave on his front door, one to file with his documentation and one to take a photo of his evidence. As darkness fell, James walked through his house, double-checking everything. His plants had self-watering globes, his mail would be held at the post office, and his security camera was functioning perfectly. Standing in his garage, James looked at Karen's blue sedan one last time. "Enjoy your stay," he said quietly, a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction washing over him. Then he pressed the button to close the garage door, listening as it rumbled down and locked into place. His plan was now in motion. Whatever happened next was out of his hands, and entirely of Karen's own making. The Florida sun felt glorious on James's face as he sat on his parents' patio, sipping fresh orange juice. His flight had gone smoothly, and the warm welcome from his mom and dad had immediately put him in vacation mode. He had successfully pushed thoughts of Karen and her car to the back of his mind. Until his phone buzzed. A notification from his home security app showed movement at his front door. James tapped the alert and watched as a video loaded. There stood Karen, dressed in yoga pants and an expensive-looking blouse, banging furiously on his door. Her face was contorted with anger as she repeatedly pressed the doorbell. "Is everything okay?" his mother asked, noticing his change in expression. "Just some neighborhood drama," James replied, not wanting to worry his parents. "Nothing important." But throughout the day, the notifications continued. 3 more times Karen returned to his door, each visit more agitated than the last. During her 4th attempt, she noticed the camera and walked right up to it. "I know you can see me," she shouted, her face filling the screen. "Open your garage right now. This is illegal imprisonment of my property." That evening, James's phone began ringing with calls from unknown numbers. He let them go to voicemail. The first was from Karen, her voice sickly sweet at first, then quickly devolving into threats. "Hi James, it's Karen from across the street. There seems to be some misunderstanding about my car. I need it for work tomorrow, so if you could please call me back immediately. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to call the police and report you for theft and false imprisonment." The second voicemail was from a man identifying himself as Karen's husband. "This is Thomas Wilson, attorney at law. What you're doing is criminal, and I can have you arrested for vehicle theft. Call me immediately or face legal consequences." James checked his security app again. The footage now showed Karen standing in his driveway with a tall man in an expensive suit, presumably Thomas, who was examining the garage door and taking pictures. "So much for vacation mode," James muttered. By day 3, things had escalated further. The security footage showed Karen arriving with 2 friends, all 3 trying different ways to open the garage. One attempted to pry it with a crowbar before Thomas rushed over and stopped her, clearly aware they were on camera. That night, James received a text message from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Don't worry about anything, James. Those people came by asking questions, but nobody in the neighborhood is helping them. We all told them the same thing, that you're on vacation, and that car has been parked there without permission for days." The husband looked embarrassed. On day 4, a police car appeared in the footage. James watched anxiously as Officer Rivera, the same officer who had responded earlier, spoke with Karen and Thomas outside his house. Though he couldn't hear the conversation, it was clear from Karen's wild gesticulations and Officer Rivera's calm, professional demeanor that things weren't going her way. His phone rang again, this time with a number he recognized. "Hello, Officer Rivera," James answered. "Mr. Miller, I'm at your residence. Mrs. Wilson has filed a complaint claiming you've stolen her vehicle." "I didn't steal anything," James replied calmly. "Her car is exactly where she parked it, in my garage, without my permission. I simply went on a pre-planned vacation." "I'm aware of the previous incidents," the officer said. "I'm just calling to confirm that you'll be returning on Saturday, as stated in the letter you left." "That's correct." "All right. I've explained to Mrs. Wilson that this remains a civil matter. She's not happy, but there's little we can do." As James hung up, he felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. 3 more days remained before his return home. He wondered what new drama those days would bring, and what state his garage would be in when he finally opened it. After a refreshing week with his parents, James boarded his return flight with mixed emotions. While the Florida sun and his mother's cooking had done wonders for his stress levels, the thought of what awaited him at home loomed large. His security camera had captured fewer incidents over the past few days, but Karen had still appeared daily, sometimes just standing in his driveway staring at his garage with her arms crossed. James's plane touched down at 2:17 p.m. on Saturday. As he collected his luggage and hailed a taxi, he mentally prepared himself for whatever confrontation might be waiting. The taxi driver seemed to sense his tension. "Going home or just visiting?" the friendly driver asked. "Home," James replied, "though I'm not sure what kind of welcome I'll get." The driver laughed. "Left the wife angry, did you?" "Nothing like that," James said with a small smile. "Just a neighborhood situation." As the taxi turned onto his street, James's heart sank. A police cruiser was parked in front of his house. Next to it stood Karen, Thomas, and two officers, one of whom was Officer Rivera. Karen was gesturing wildly while Thomas spoke more calmly with the other officer. "You can stop here," James told the driver, choosing to be dropped off a few houses away to assess the situation before jumping in. The taxi driver raised his eyebrows. "Good luck with whatever that is, buddy." James paid the fare and walked toward his house, rolling his suitcase behind him. Mrs. Rodriguez spotted him from her yard and hurried over. "James, thank goodness you're back. That woman has been making everyone's life miserable. She even accused me of helping you plan this whole thing." "I'm sorry you got dragged into this," James said sincerely. "Don't you apologize," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "Some people need to learn they can't just take what isn't theirs." As James approached his driveway, all heads turned in his direction. Karen immediately stormed toward him. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a finger so close to his face that he had to step back. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I've missed important appointments. My daughter couldn't get to her tennis lessons. My husband had to UBR to court." Officer Rivera stepped forward. "Ma'am, please step back." The second officer, whose nameplate read Daniels, approached James. "Mr. Miller? I'm Officer Daniels. We received a complaint about an alleged vehicle theft." James nodded calmly. "I understand. As Officer Rivera knows, I've been on a pre-planned vacation. Before I left, I made multiple requests for Mrs. Wilson to remove her car from my garage, where she parked it without permission. I have documentation of all of this." Thomas Wilson stepped forward, looking considerably less confident than his wife. "My client, my wife, admits there was a misunderstanding about the use of the garage, but locking her vehicle inside constitutes illegal detention of property." "Actually," Officer Rivera interjected, "after reviewing the reports and evidence Mr. Miller provided before his departure, this is clearly a civil matter. Mrs. Wilson parked on private property without permission, despite multiple requests to remove the vehicle." Karen's face reddened. "He deliberately trapped my car." "No," James replied evenly. "I simply locked my own garage before leaving on vacation, as I would normally do. Your car happened to be inside because you refused to move it." Officer Daniels looked between them. "Mr. Miller, are you willing to open the garage now?" "Of course," James said, walking to the keypad. "That was always the plan." The garage door rumbled open, revealing the blue sedan sitting exactly as it had been for the past week. Karen pushed past everyone and rushed to her car, dramatically checking it for damage. "The battery's dead," she wailed after trying to start it. "You'll pay for this." Thomas placed a restraining hand on his wife's arm, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Karen, that's enough. Let's just get a jump start and go home." Officer Daniels turned to James. "Do you want to press trespassing charges, sir?" James looked at Karen, who was now being quietly but firmly lectured by her husband. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I think the point has been made." Sunday morning arrived with a stillness that felt unfamiliar after the previous day's drama. James sat on his front porch with a cup of coffee, enjoying the quiet neighborhood sounds of birds chirping and the occasional car passing by. Karen's blue sedan was finally gone from his garage, jumped back to life by a reluctant Thomas, and driven away with Karen glaring daggers at James the entire time. His peaceful morning was interrupted by the cheerful voice of Mrs. Rodriguez calling from her yard. "James, have you seen it yet?" James set down his coffee. "Seen what?" Mrs. Rodriguez hurried over with her tablet in hand. "The neighborhood Facebook group. That Karen woman posted about you last night, but it's not going the way she planned." She handed James the tablet. On screen was a lengthy post from Karen Wilson, complete with crying face emojis and multiple exclamation points. The post described how a cruel neighbor had imprisoned her car for an entire week, causing her severe emotional distress and financial hardship. She had tagged the local news stations and ended with a call for others to share her story of injustice. What caught James' attention, however, were the comments. Dozens of them, almost all taking his side. "Didn't you park in his garage without permission?" wrote one commenter. "My cousin lives on that street. She says you've been parking wherever you want for months," wrote another. Even residents from Karen's own apartment complex had chimed in. "You complained at the last tenants' meeting that you shouldn't have to pay for a second parking spot. Is this why?" As James scrolled through the comments, he noticed several people had shared their own stories of encounters with Karen, taking up 2 parking spaces at the grocery store, demanding to be seated first at restaurants, yelling at baristas who got her coffee order wrong. "The internet never forgets," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a satisfied nod. "And neither do neighbors." By Monday afternoon, the situation had taken another turn. James returned from work to find a formal letter in his mailbox from Wilson Legal Services. With a sigh, he opened it, expecting a threat of lawsuit. Instead, he found a brief, professionally worded apology. "On behalf of my wife, Karen Wilson, I extend a sincere apology for the unauthorized use of your garage and any inconvenience this may have caused. We acknowledge there was no permission granted for this use of your property. Please accept the enclosed check for $250 as compensation for the trouble. We consider this matter closed and will ensure no similar incidents occur in the future." It was signed by Thomas Wilson, with a business card attached. James noticed something handwritten on the back of the card. Turning it over, he found a brief personal note. "I am truly sorry about this. Karen has been going through some things. This has been a wake-up call for both of us. Thank you for not pressing charges. Tom." The next day, James heard from Officer Rivera, who called to follow up on the incident. "Just wanted to let you know, Mrs. Wilson tried to file a complaint against you for vehicle theft, but after reviewing all the evidence, we declined to pursue it," the officer explained. "In fact, we gave her a warning about filing false reports." "I appreciate that," James replied. "I think everyone learned something from this experience." "Some lessons are harder than others," Officer Rivera said with a chuckle. "By the way, several officers at the station thought your solution was pretty brilliant. Not that we're officially encouraging that kind of thing, of course." As the week progressed, James noticed something remarkable happening in the neighborhood. People he had never spoken to before were waving to him, giving him thumbs up or stopping to chat. Somehow, standing up to Karen had made him a minor local celebrity. Even more satisfying was the complete absence of parking problems. Not just for James, but for everyone on the street. Karen's car was now always properly parked in the Oakwood apartment lot, and she took great pains to avoid walking past James's house. The reckoning had come for Karen's entitled behavior, not through confrontation or legal action, but through the simple application of natural consequences and the power of community opinion. 3 months had passed since the garage incident, and life on James's street had returned to normal, though a better version of normal than before. The crisp autumn air carried fallen leaves across his driveway as James returned home from work one Friday evening. He parked in his driveway as usual, a habit he had maintained despite now having a completely Karen-free garage. As he gathered his things from the car, he noticed unusual activity at the Oakwood apartments across the street. A moving truck was parked in front, with workers carrying furniture out of the building. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at her fence, as if summoned by the activity. "Guess who's moving out?" she called to James with a knowing smile. James walked over. "Karen and Thomas?" "The very same. Thomas was just over here asking if I needed any moving boxes they had extra. Seemed in good spirits, but Karen stayed in the car the whole time." James wasn't surprised. In the months following the incident, he had only seen Karen a handful of times, and each time she had quickly turned in the other direction, never making eye contact. "Did he say where they're moving to?" James asked. "A house in the suburbs. Apparently, they've been wanting more space. Thomas said something interesting, though, that recent events had given them perspective on how they interact with their community." Later that evening, James took his recycling out and found himself face to face with Thomas, who was breaking down cardboard boxes by the apartment dumpsters. James, Thomas nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable but not unfriendly. Thomas, James replied. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned you're moving. Yes, finally found a place with a two-car garage, Thomas said with a small, ironic smile. Figured it was worth the investment. They shared a brief chuckle, the tension between them easing. How's Karen? James asked, surprising himself with the genuine curiosity in his voice. Thomas sighed. Cheese? Working on things. Started therapy, actually. That whole situation with your garage was a wake-up call for us in more ways than one. Her behavior had been getting more extreme, and I've been enabling it by fixing her messes. He paused. I never properly thanked you for not pressing charges. We all make mistakes, James said simply. Some bigger than others, Thomas admitted. Anyway, I should get back. Good luck with the neighborhood. You got a good one here. People look out for each other. As Thomas walked away, James realized that was true. The garage incident had connected him with neighbors he'd barely known before. The following weekend, he hosted a small barbecue in his backyard, with Mrs. Rodriguez and several other neighbors attending. As they enjoyed the food, the conversation inevitably turned to the Karen incident, as it had come to be known locally. You know, they're using your story in the homeowners association meetings now, said Bill from 2 doors down. Kind of a cautionary tale about respecting property boundaries. I heard they're even mentioning it in the Oakwood Apartments welcome packet, added another neighbor, to general laughter. Well, I just hope Karen learned something from it all, James said. Mrs. Rodriguez raised her glass. Here's to standing your ground without losing your dignity. James, you taught us all something about handling difficult people. Later, after everyone had gone home, James stood in his garage, now organized exactly as he wanted it. The space that had once been occupied by Karen's car now held his workbench, where he had started building birdhouses as a new hobby. Sometimes the best resolutions didn't come from confrontation or endless arguments. Sometimes they came from simply enforcing boundaries and letting natural consequences do their work. The entire neighborhood seemed more connected, more aware of each other, in a positive way. As James closed his garage door that night, he smiled at the thought that sometimes life's most effective lessons come packaged in the most unexpected ways, like a locked garage door and a week-long vacation.